Welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Toni, a medium, a tarot reader, a lady of many talents, and probably one of my favourite subjects. And we got into it and we really talked about it. And it went on for quite some time. And I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you doing, Toni?
I'm doing really well, David. How about you?
As I've already said, I'm very excited because this is the second opportunity to talk because we missed the first one. And
Yeah,
it really was and am looking forward to it. So just
yeah.
briefly explain to everybody why I'm so excited to talk to you.
Well, for those of you who don't know, David loves the topic of metaphysics and mediumship.
I
And
do.
I happen to be a tarot medium. So I read tarot cards, and my mediumship abilities were stoked by my reading tarot. So I recently wrote a book called Soul Tutor, Gamified Cheat Codes to Understanding Others and Yourself Better Through Astrology and Tarot. And it has a partner journal. So we're here to talk about that, all things metaphysics, tarot, um, mediumship, just living a metaphysical lifestyle.
Yeah, and that is it in a nutshell. So regular
Mhm.
listeners will know that I do like mediumship and I do like just talking. I love the subject of spirituality. Um, when did it start for you?
Mediumship?
Or just
Me,
when did it, so if I give you an example of what I mean, um, I always remember as a child, I was raised as what I call an Irish Catholic because my mum is
okay.
from Ireland, so I was raised in the Catholic Church.
Hmm.
As a kid, I always felt and was always searching for some answer that there's something going on and there's something that I'm supposed to learn. There's something that Jesus, God, whatever you want to describe it, is out
Hmm.
there, and your journey, your job is to understand what it is and how you connect with it, which I'm still trying to figure out.
There's a lot going on, and so there's
Yeah,
a lot to figure out. You'll always be learning. For me, it started, well, what I remember from being a child is it started with me um, talking to rocks. I know that might
yeah.
sound weird,
No. I
but
understand that.
I loved stones, and it seemed like they all had a conversation. Um, so I guess I was more of an introverted child because I really didn't need friends and people to play with. I always
Yeah.
either had rocks or I was I was talking to the worms outside after it rained, and my dad was quite the fisherman. And I remember he had taken me to a tackle and bait shop to to get bait for fishing. And when we got back home, I took them out of the little styrofoam cup, and I told them, "Shoo, go away, and run." And I remember probably being about four or
Your dad
five.
loved that.
Oh, he was livid. Uh, he told my mom, "Get your daughter." I became my mom's child at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, but I remember telling him very distinctly, just because you can't hear them scream doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
And so I was advocating on the behalf of the little guy. But as it, I was also the child that would astral travel.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I did not understand what was happening, but my great grandmother, my dad's grandmother, helped me to understand what was happening to me. Because sometimes when you astral travel, it can be a little bit unnerving because of who you meet in the astral plane uh, and and how that happens, right? So, in this avatar of a physical body, we are whatever age we are in human years, but our soul, our energy is eternal. And so, when you astral travel, there is no age, there is no time the way that we know it. And so, what is beyond the veil of what we see engages you based on your eternity, not based on your humanity. And so, as a child, my great grandmother helped to to teach me and to guide me on how to control what I was experiencing so that I would be empowered. And when I came back into my body as a human, I would not be terrified. Some other things that happened as a child is I could see. hear and understand things that were not there. Um, I would, I can't say they're premonitions, but I would also have dreams of places. Um, so my grandfather, my mother's father, owns and still owns. We have air land. They own a lot of land. So much so it's like a small town. And so all of his siblings built houses on that land. And my grandfather, he built buildings. He had a nightclub called the Cafe. He had a restaurant. He had a mechanic shop, and obviously the family home, and uh, there's farms and all this other stuff. Well, when I was born, n- none of those buildings were there. But as a child, I was probably under 10. I know I was under 10, but I remember talking to my mom, explaining to her that I had, gone to grandpa and grandma's house because they were alive. But in my dream, I had gone to this place and I described to her what my grandfather's cafe or this nightclub looked like. I could tell her I could recite the song that was playing. I can't remember the words now, but I can sometimes still hear the music. I saw the people at the bar. I saw the room to the side. I saw, just the people. I could tell her, who was behind the bar. And I remember the look that she had on her face, which scared me a little bit. And then she said, "How do you know this?" And I said, "Well, I saw it." And she was like, "You can't possibly know that. You weren't even born." And I said, "Well, I'm just telling you." So when you have a lot of those conversations as a child, some adults can become unnerved.
Right.
And so you learn very quickly to shut it up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you don't get in trouble. And I was already an introvert as a child. So, um, it, being kind of the outcast, you kind of learn, let me just try to do something to fit in, right? And so you learn not to talk about certain things. Um, but, you know, probably when I was about 17 or 18, became brave enough to try again to understand some of those things. But then I wound up going to a church that told me that it was demonic to meditate. Uh, it was antichrist to use tarot cards. It was antichrist to pretty much just be me. Like, how do you expect me to stop astral traveling? I don't do it intentionally, right?
Yeah.
How do you stop yourself from seeing, hearing, and understanding? But I did recognize in the church that the very things that they told me were anti-Christian were just called a different name in the church. And I'm like, oh, well, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want me to say that, but you call it a prophet. Outside of the church, they call it a psychic, right? Um, you don't you say that it's the prophet or the prophetess speaking a word from the Lord, but what it really is mediumship, right? When you're bringing people through. So it's like, oh, okay, so it's just different terminology. um, Later I would, come away from the church a couple of decades later, just because I could never get my questions answered, and the answers that were given just weren't lining up with what I knew to be true. And so I decided to trust myself. Um, yeah, because just when you try to live in a way that shuts down your truth, especially a truth that is based on loving all and harming none, right? Um, your life becomes chaotic and rather catawampus, and the decisions that you make are not for not only your greater good, but the greater good of the people who are involved in those decisions, who are impacted by it. So, in my in my late 30s, early 40s, I went back to tarot, uh, cartomancy, candle magic, using runes, um, you know, scrying, using incense and that sort of thing, just meditating and reconnecting. Um, and so my life took a huge turn for the better. I wound up getting out of debt that I'd gotten into from being in a previous marriage, wound up buying a house, wound up going back to school, getting 2 degrees, changing my career. My kids were having the times of their lives. Life just became great. And then I started using what I knew to help people for free, right? Because I saw how my life went, 180 degrees
Yeah.
turn by connecting with the divine and following that as opposed to following man-made's ideology of who I should be and how I should show up in the world. And not that people weren't didn't have good intentions. I think people do the best they can with what they know, and people like that, 4 or 5, 6-year-old little girl, they do want to be accepted, and so if it's not acceptable to live a life where you are connected with the divine, they will shut that down. And so I decided that I could no longer literally, physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, I could no longer afford
Yeah.
to not be me. And so, yeah, so I started helping other people while continuing to build my life with the gods, with truth, with source. And I read for free for people for a number of years. And then I started paying to read for people by registering to attend conferences and fairs. And then it just allowing people to give a donation or whatever. And sometimes it covered the cost of me doing that. um, Most of the times it covered the cost, but initially, it was out of pocket for me to do that. Um, and then my best friend, she owned a metaphysical store, and her tarot card reader had retired, and she asked me if I'd be willing to do it. And I had had a dream a couple of weeks prior to that somebody would ask me to come and read, um, and that I was just to say yes on the spot, no questions asked. So when she asked me, I'm like, yeah. She was like, well, you don't know how much you're getting paid. I was like, oh, and you're paying me? Great. I'll do it. Um, and so I read there for years. Um, and I didn't get a lot of money because for me, it wasn't about that. It was just really introducing people to tarot. But as I was doing that, I started having mediumship moments. And to be honest with you, David, I thought I was losing my shit. I
You know, it's
I'm a
it's
woman of a
it's scary stuff. It's scary stuff. You know,
yeah,
I, I have spoken about it on the podcast before. When as I said to you, when I started writing 22 Floors, one of the things I put in the forward of the book was that I didn't write the book. I was just told what to write, and
absolutely.
and I describe it. I can't remember exactly how I describe it, but I could actually reach up and get a copy. But it's literally when I was in those moments of some of it was just a cathartic experience, but there's moments where I'm tuned into something, and in those moments I described that tuning in, that there's like, I think it was 7 bodies, like 7 energies or whatever, and and that's the visual experience for me to understand what was happening. Don't take it
Sure.
as a literal experience of that's what's going on. It's just,
Mhm.
and the way I try to describe it is that words are poor. They're not a good example of how to describe what happens,
Yes.
and but they have to show you something so you can understand it, and
Mm.
that it's effectively like, it was like 7 energies talking into what can only be described as a well, which would act as a portal, and that's what was I was tuned into, and
Yeah.
that's where the book was written from.
Yeah.
And and I at a point I just have to, because I'm not very, I have not very, I'm not, I was about to say I'm not very good at it. No, I'm not interested in somebody's belief on that. I've just written
Exactly.
I've just written what I saw and where that
Yes.
information came from to me. You can take that whichever
Yes.
way you want. And for
Yes.
years, I kind of
Absolutely.
battled with that. And then I got to a point, it's not my place to care what you think of
Absolutely.
that. You know,
Absolutely.
and it is. It's for a long time, I stepped away from any form of mediumships, crystals, or anything, because I just got tired of this kind of to justify a belief. And
Absolutely.
and I just like, Whereas now, I just, if people ask me about it, I'm happy to talk about tuning in, instinct, meditation, whatever you want to call it. Um, but
Yes,
but I don't need your permission anymore.
absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. That part. Yeah, it's a very freeing space energetically to get to where you say, you know what? I'm just gonna live
Mm.
my truth,
Yeah.
and I'm not looking for validation or approval or acceptance or anything else from anybody else. This is just where I'm at. And I took that into even into writing this book that I wrote, right? So the book Soul Tutor is really, it really came about because um, I had a client come in one day for a tarot card reading, and she had had a stillbirth, a stillbirth,
Wow.
and she was grieving. Right, she's had survivor's guilt, mother's guilt, whatever you want to call it. And everything I know about mediumship, I learned from dead people. I've never been to school for mediumship. I've never been trained. I wound up reading a book about it after it happened to me so often because I needed to stop being afraid of my own self, right? Because where am I going to go? But everything I've learned, everything I know is from dead people. And the conversation that I had with her child who had crossed over, I cannot, my mind was blown because I'm
Yeah.
like, what? That's what's happening? I didn't know that, right? I'm a mother. I've given birth to two children, and well, they're adults now, but I didn't understand what was happening with labor pains. Like, I didn't understand that it was the soul being compacted down into what we could only understand as like a zip file into the avatar and the mind of the human uh, anatomy, right? And that's pressing down, that compacting, um, that shoring up and storing away. There is a physical response to that action. So the soul, the energy, that warm, hot part of us that gives our body fire, that that is always with the divine. But our mind and our spirit and our body is a human design,
Yeah.
right? And so when the soul comes into to partner with that other three-part being, right?
Yeah.
Three is very important in the world
Yeah.
of
The mind, body, and
spirituality,
spirit.
right? Mind, body, and spirit. That's the human makeup of us.
In the name of the
But this
Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
exactly, right? And so when that happened, the child showed me, oh, this is what was happening, and I go into that in the book a little bit. It said that in that experience, it realized what it would be like the separation in some ways from source,
Mm.
and it decided, I'm not doing that. I am not ready for that, and it said I'm out, right? But at the same time, the mother had wanted an experience of being a mother, so it did it in such a way that it met every ask that her soul had for purposes of being a mother in this manifested reality without the longevity
Yeah.
that we want when we give birth to a child. So she still went through the pregnancy. She still, you know, gave birth. She still chose clothing for her child. She knew what it was like to choose clothing for its first day and its last, or for an experience. She knew what the child would like. She had all of these experiences, right? And so it was just mind blowing to me, the things that I had learned in that instance. And as a person who has also miscarried, it answered questions for me that I didn't even know I had,
Yeah.
right? Um, and when that happened to me, it was many decades ago, and I was in the church at the time, and there's certain things. I don't understand why everything is taboo in the church and why Christians are scared of everything. But especially for people who say, greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world, and no weapon formed against you shall prosper, yet they're terrified of everything and everybody that's not within their box.
Yeah.
Blows my mind. But that child, that soul answered so many questions for me. And in that moment, in that very moment, it tutored both me and its mother. And so that's where the title soul tutor comes from. And so I thought about that, and I thought about all the many ways that children teach us about the truths of who we are from source before we indoctrinate them with society's ideologies, uh, and separateness, right? Children believe that they are, can be, and can do anything. And I tell my own grandchildren, you do not have to be grown to be great. You can be great right now, right?
Yeah.
Um, but as adults, I heard Les Brown say this. He's a famous speaker. Um, he said, most people die when they're 25. They
Mm,
just don't give up. They don't leave the planet for another 40 years or so, right?
yeah.
Because they refuse to believe the truth of their experience of life, and the purity of that. And so, yeah, I wrote this book, Soul Tutor, to talk about all the ways that children teach us about who we are and help us to meet our soul's goals based on their zodiacal cocktail. So I break it down into every zodiac sign, and not only each zodiac sign, but the three deacons within it, right? First, second, and third deacon.
What are the
And
deacons? Apologies, I don't know that.
so, so in the zodiac, each sign is made up of about 10, 30 degrees. And that 30 degrees is broken down into three separate sections. The first 10 days, 7 to 10 days or so, is what they call the first deacon. It is it is the, well, I was going to say it's the strongest part of that particular zodiac, but that's going to fluctuate based on whether or not somebody is a cardinal, fixed, or mutable sign. Um, and it talks about the weight of a particular element associated with that zodiac. For instance, I'm Cancerian. Cancers are, we are what they call cardinal water,
Hmm?
but I am born in the first decan of Cancer, which means that it is the strongest manifestation of the personality type of a Cancerian person or personality. So when people are talking about some of the strong traits of Cancer, about being more of an introvert into themselves, not because we're we stay away from people, but we're very guarded when it comes to our emotions. When they talk about people being very loving for their family members and those who are close to them, um, those typical traits of any particular zodiac, specifically for Cancer, are in that first decan. Now, what you will find when you get to know other Cancerians is that we're not all the same.
No.
You will find that those Cancerians who are born within, the second decan, or like the days 10 through 20 of that zodiac sign, they are um, they are touched with the energy of Cancer, right? So they do have those traits, but they tend to be more fixed in their way of being. They can be emotionally, they tend to be more stronger one way or another, right? Very much touched by the energy of Scorpio, which is also water sign. And so you'll notice that second decan Cancerians are, um, they're pretty much take it or leave it people. Well, when it comes to making decisions. Either they're going to be happy or they're going to be sad. There is really no in between with them when it comes to their emotions. But then you have the third deacon cancers, and they're going to be in those last 7 or 10 days of the zodiac. And those people are going to be more of, yeah, they have strong emotions one way or another, but they don't tend to stay in that vein very much. Yes, they do tend to be more, I don't want to say of a recluse, but they do tend to be introverted a little bit. But of the extroverts of the Cancerians, you're going to find those to be the third deacon, because they have both the energy of Cancer as well as Pisces. So they're more mutable. They're more likely to kind of go along to get along. They're going to be the ones who are going to be they want to have all of the family get togethers at their house.
Yeah.
They want to be the ones who make all the cookies, and they want to cook, and they want to do all this stuff. Whereas first deacon Cancers, we want to have people at the house, but we want to have the people at the house for a particular reason, right? We have goals. It's
Yeah.
there is a strategy behind it. Whereas that third deacon Cancerian is more like, oh, we just want everybody to come over and spend time. Whereas that second deacon Cancer is like, you can come over and spend time, but you've got so much time to spend, and do not cross me. And only the people who are in good graces with me are allowed.
Yeah.
you know. So I talk about like how each zodiac develops into their being based on their zodiacal cocktail, um, as they are children, so that parents and those people who engage with and love children will understand that, first of all, your child, it's unusual. I won't say unusual. It's unlikely that you will have a child that is of your same zodiacal cocktail. It happens, but it's not frequent. For instance, my dad's a Leo, my mom's an Aquarius. All of my siblings um, are cardinal signs. Each of us are from a different element, with the exception of two who happen to be mutable water. But everybody else is cardinal, either cardinal earth, cardinal fire, cardinal water, right? Um, my mom and my dad are both fixed energy. Dad's fixed fire, mom's fixed air. Right? But they have cardinal children and mutable children. How does that happen? It happens because the soul enters the body with lessons to teach the parents and their siblings and all those around them. But they also enter because they have lessons to learn from those same people. And so the book Soul Tutor talks about how we can learn from each other, not by trying to mold children to be who you want them to be. Certainly, we want our children to be positive, productive members of society who live a moral value where they don't harm people, but they love and protect themselves and family, right? We don't want problems.
Yeah.
And we want
Parents
them
kind
to,
of need to let their children teach them what sort of child they are.
yes. And so my book does that. It helps people to kind of see that. It's like, oh, I'm, fixed air, or whatever, or I'm cardinal air, but my child is mutable fire. Let's
Mm.
figure out how this is going to work,
Yeah.
um, because the mutable fire wants to be a free spirit, but that cardinal air wants, guidelines and restrictions, and there's a right and wrong way, and it
I,
is
I s- I
killing their
s-
Sag
I
kid.
s- I say this to parents with children all the time, and it's easy for me because I don't have children. So we're great at being an outsider looking in. It's like,
Sure.
and bearing in mind every parent is biased, but the biggest issue I find with a lot of kids is when you have nice kids and you teach them you've got to be nice. No, no, if your children are already nice, you need to teach them boundaries because
Yes,
otherwise all the other kids will manipulate them. And some kids
absolutely.
are effing horrible and they will
That is
bully and
true.
manipulate your children because your children
That's
want to be
true.
nice, your children want to comfort them. If you
Hmm.
have a child that's like that, teach that child doesn't need any input from you to be nice. They already are.
Yes.
Teach them
Yes.
boundaries. Teach them how to
Yes.
just put up boundaries, be polite, say no.
Yes. I agree with you 100%. I'm still trying to figure out why children are not nice. That one I don't get. Like somebody asked me before, are children born bad or do we create bad
Both.
children with bad behavior?
Both.
I don't have the answer to that.
I would say so. I always reflect. There's two ways I reflect. One is the first one from a spiritual point of view, which is that there's three ways that I kind of communicate to look at it. You either believe that there's nothing exists, in which case we don't need to have a conversation. There's nothing I'm going to teach you, learn you, or convince you of. The second one is you believe in some form of deity, in which case
Yes.
that's culture based most likely on your parents and where you were born. Okay?
Okay.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you examine them in any detail, you'll see the root of them all is pretty similar, regardless of where they
Mhm.
started in the world.
Yes.
The third one is we are a soul, and that this is a
Yes.
vessel and this is a body. So the
Yes.
question isn't what is my purpose? That's the wrong question. The
Mm.
question is
Yeah.
if I came from somewhere,
Yeah.
what made me decide to leave to do
Hmm.
this?
Yes.
Why would I choose this as an option if I'm going
Yes.
back to the place I came from?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
if we, this idea that we incarnate, and you and I briefly discussed reincarnation before we started,
Yeah. Yeah.
is that is the idea that I belong somewhere else.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, well, this is a holiday. There's no way you chose this as an option for a holiday. You can't believe in love, togetherness, and oneness and said, I know what, for shits and giggles, I'm going to go to a place where I can die in a miserable death and be heartbroken. No, no. So the question is why? Why would I do
Mm.
this? And at that
Yeah.
point, you can then start, okay, well, let's explore learning and stuff like that. So that's the spiritual kind of reflection. The second one I have is I look at the natural world,
Yes.
animals. We're animals, the same as everything else is there.
Hmm.
And weirdly, you can sometimes see compassion in animals towards
Yes.
animals that aren't their species. And you can also
Hmm.
see some real nasty ones
Yeah.
within their own species and being nasty. Do you know what I mean? You can, predators will take out other predators for no reason other than your competition. You'll
Yes.
sometimes
That is
see
true.
rare examples of predators being compassionate. But you will also find horses that will go up and bully other animals for no reason whatsoever. There's no purpose to that other than spiteful. So I do believe that we have all of these characteristics within us, and you can be
Yeah.
so I think sometimes some children just need to learn boundaries, but
Mm.
sometimes there's just some people are nasty. They just have
Yeah.
that horribleness in them,
Yeah.
and you can't, the way that I balance that, for want of a better term, you
Hmm.
can't have one experience without knowing the other.
Mm.
If- You can only know what heartbreak is if you've actually been in love.
That's true.
If you talk
And
to
it's
anyone
ended
that's,
horribly.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. But you
Yeah.
had to be in love
Hmm.
first. I've s-
Yes.
I've said before that there's. Have you ever heard that sound where somebody is sobbing? There's crying, and then there's uncontrollable sobbing. And there's
Yes.
only two times you hear that.
Yeah.
There's three times you hear that. Two of them are connected to whether somebody has lost a parent, a sibling, or a child. Right? That there's a, or the second one is when somebody's heartbroken, and it's normally from betrayal.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know the
Yeah.
sound I'm talking about. That sobbing.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah,
know it
yeah,
on so many
yeah,
levels,
yeah.
not too many.
And
Yeah.
what that, but that only comes because you loved,
Yeah. 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 There's that.
and you couldn't experience that pain without having that same intensity of loving somebody.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, my heart goes out to anyone that's experienced it. And it's the
Yeah.
worst feeling in the world.
Yeah. Love is the best feeling in the world. And to lose that love, whether through natural
Yeah.
causes or
Mm.
otherwise, is heart wrenching.
And I think that's the same with when you look at good and evil. To understand when somebody's being really good, it's only because
Hmm.
you understand what evil can be.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I
and
guess
it
that.
And if you look at acts in war, for every really horrendous act, there's a really
Mhm.
amazing act of compassion between two people that should be enemies, or somebody saving another soul.
Yeah.
There are, and you learn the stories of soldiers on each side who showed
Yeah.
amazing acts of courage and compassion for the other side.
Yeah.
And but then there's stories of people who are absolutely evil to their own people.
Yeah. Yes. That is very true.
But that
Yeah.
under
That is a,
that understanding of compassion, we like,
mhm.
wow, that's so amazing. It's only because we
Mhm.
know of the acts of evil.
Yeah. I a friend of mine told me, he's like, you've got rose-colored glasses on, because I'm always looking for the good in people
Yeah.
and always hoping that, like if we could just have a good world where everything was at peace and nobody hurt people and everybody was good, that would be great. And he's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. It's not the way it works.
There,
But
there,
it's a
there, is,
wish. It's a wish.
there is a theory that there is a theory that it can happen, but you can't have it without strict boundaries.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I'd be open to a conversation to figure out how that could happen for
so
sure.
so
For
here's
sure.
a thing that some people will be aware of this, but it's like if you've ever been to like Saudi Arabia or stuff like that, there's a
Yeah.
reason that they say you can leave a £50,000 Rolex on a table and nobody touches it. It'll still
Oh
be there
yeah,
when you
I've
go back
been.
the next. Yeah, yeah,
And that's true. You can
yeah,
leave anything in a
yeah,
taxi and they will call you and bring
yeah.
it back to you.
Why
Absolutely.
is that?
I I don't know. I don't
Because
know. I
because
enjoyed the experience while I was there though, I'll tell you
because they
that.
still have penalties, like they'll chop your hands off if you're caught stealing. The consequences are severe. So it's cultural, but it's cultural as well. Do you know? You have to understand,
Mhm.
because they have this kind of culture of this thing. We just don't do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's deep,
Yeah.
and and if you look at anyone that has really really severe consequences to what we might describe as an overreaction, they tend to have
Mhm.
the best
Mhm.
cultures.
Interesting.
Because
Interesting.
boundaries come first. If you put boundaries
Mhm.
in, like I said, if you look at the animal kingdom, if you look at the animal
Mhm.
kingdom, if anyone in the pack, the herd, whatever, steps out of line, big
Mhm.
male turns up and really gives them a hiding they won't ever forget.
It's very interesting.
Even the mother.
Huh.
You look at a mother lion or
Mhm.
and if one of the cubs steps out of line, she doesn't mess about with them.
I
But
can attest
but
to that as a parent.
yeah,
I
but
my children have boundaries.
the opposite of that is they'll risk their life to save their cubs.
Absolutely.
So it's this,
Absolutely.
but there's
Yeah.
boundaries, and and I think sometimes that's partly to do with just like almost first world problems. Life is incredibly comfortable compared to where it was a few hundred years ago for people,
For
which
sure.
is, so,
For
and
sure.
that brings its own problems. Without hardship, we kind of get comfortable, and we get lazy, and
Yeah.
it's difficult to be disciplined if there's nothing to discipline you.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess you're right, David. That makes sense. So I guess the question then would come into play is who would create the boundaries, right?
Yeah, so this is the thing, is because society is we're look, if you look at any culture, I remember I can't remember the lady's name, so my apologies for that. But she made this really good thing about traditions and cultures. The reason they were so strong for so many centuries is because, quite simply, it worked. Nobody said it was the best solution, but it worked, and they just kept doing what worked, because the minute they didn't do that, it went wrong. So lots of these things we don't like, are
Hmm.
coming back to bite us, because we're focused on, well, it wasn't perfect. No, it wasn't, but it worked, and that was important, much more important once upon a time, because you didn't have
Hmm.
good medicine, you didn't have good government, you didn't have police and authorities and politicians, and for all the negativities around the modern construct. Once upon a time,
Hmm.
that never existed. And
Okay.
the reason we brought these institutions into place is because the
Hmm.
world needed them, so that
Hmm.
people could develop and become better people, better communities. Because once
Hmm.
upon a
Hmm.
time, every landowner, every lord, every tribal leader, whatever, if that
Mm-hmm.
person was a tyrant, your life
Mm-hmm.
was at risk. They were very rarely were they generous and beneficial to people. It was
That's
rule of
true.
fear, and
Yeah.
eventually fairness came about over thousands of centuries of
Mm-hmm.
needing because we were started to establish ourselves and settle into communities. The communities needed to be fairer for all people. So you ended up with
Mm-hmm.
politicians, police, and all of these institutions,
Mm-hmm.
and they came. The principle of where they came
Mm-hmm.
from was this is for the greater good of society, and we've kind of forgotten what that's supposed to be and what that's supposed to mean. Well, at least in practice, if we all sit down and talk about it, we can. 99% of us will agree at some level of what
Mm-hmm.
that is and what's good and what's bad. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we focus so much on the degrees of separation rather than the degrees of togetherness.
Oh, that's true. I absolutely agree with
I
that.
mean,
Yeah, we do.
if I look at it spiritually, if I look at the seven chakras, say,
Mm-hmm.
most people will agree that the first three chakras are physical, to do with the physical body.
Yeah,
Okay,
in some
for
ways, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of their emotions and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
The next three chakras is to
Mm-hmm.
do with higher energy and spirituality. But when
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
all combine, you get the entrance to the seventh chakra to the gate of heaven. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
all six have to work to get the entrance to seven. And if we
That's
focus on
true.
how they
They
were
have to be
different,
aligned.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. There it is in a nutshell. We have to be aligned. But if we focused on their
Mm-hmm.
differences, we'd always be
Mm-hmm.
what we'd never notice which wasn't working, which wasn't. We'd never get towards things being aligned. But you
Yeah.
have to get that alignment. You have to accept their differences. Three of them, because we were talking about threes before.
Yeah.
Three
Yeah.
three of them are different to the other three, but it's only
Yeah.
by acknowledging their difference that you can align them to get to the entrance of
That's
heaven,
true.
the seventh
That is
chakra.
very true. Yeah. You you have such a wealth of knowledge, David,
Thank you.
that I could just sit and talk to you forever about any and everything. So, tell me what led you on your path to um
Where so mine's a complex. I don't know if it's simple or complex actually. As a child, I was
let's not
definitely
categorize it. Let's just talk
yeah,
about it.
yeah. As a child, I've never not been fascinated by I suppose God, Jesus, the universe, the meaning of life, and I put that down to growing up as a Catholic and being in church, and I was fascinated by the church, and for a period of time wanted to be a priest, and then the priest had pointed out that I discovered girls, and that got my attention. So I wasn't going to do well in that, and but I always just felt that there was more to something, and there was something I didn't understand,
Yes.
and I literally, probably to my detriment, it focus on it too much because I'm always like, what's this thing that's missing? What's this thing that's missing? And that's because every now and again I find this thing that I can tune into. And when I tuned into that, I understand everything and I manifest things that just out of nowhere. And when I'm separated from that, I just, yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but it can lead me into dark places.
Yeah, I understand.
And
I I have said before that if I could just stay in that
yeah,
space where I am one with the divine and aware of my oneness, because we're always at one with the divine, right?
yeah,
It's not as if the divine checks out and goes away. It's that we reduce our consciousness and connectivity, like you were talking about with the chakras.
yeah,
But like when you have, well, for me, when I have my quiet time with the divine every morning, um, it's something about being in that space that just makes everything right and good. And if I could just stay in that,
yeah.
without having to now, okay, let me go do the dishes, and, you know,
And
let me
it's this
go run errands. And
this funny
yeah,
thing that I realise that when I'm connected, I said like I manifest instantly. but I don't want anything.
Yeah.
Just when I just lose this desire, and things turn up, and I'm very extremely grateful for them. But when I'm not in that place, I have I like I suddenly you could put £100,000 on the table, I'd feel poor. Whereas when I'm in that place, it's like, well, I don't need £100,000. I don't even need $10. I don't need anything. I'm good.
It's like the
Everything is
only way that
taken
I know.
care of.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. It's as if, oh, well, nothing else matters.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when people are talking about having near death experiences
Yes.
where, they're just like, yes, I love my family, but I absolutely do not want to go back. I want to stay in this space because it's
Yes.
perfect,
And
you
it's
know?
this because when I'm in that space, I know I'm
Hmm.
being taken care of. As soon as I step out of it,
Yes.
it's like, who's
Now
taking
you've got
care
a
of me?
deal.
And when I'm in that space, I'm not worried about the future. I'm not worried about the past. I've forgiven
No.
everything. But
Yeah.
when I'm not in that space,
Hmm.
what's my future? Who can give me a reading? What can I do? Where am I here? And you're just like, I
Yeah.
need to know. I need to know. Am I going to be okay tomorrow? Am I going to be okay today?
Yeah.
And I have no evidence in my life that I've never not been okay. You know,
No,
I
right?
I have had some of the most fortunate experiences in my life.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've talked about this a lot on a little bit on the podcast. I've talked about, I nearly went to prison when I was in my 20s, right? I ended up
Right.
bankrupt and all that. I rarely ever talk about the fact that on the day that I went to court and I was due to be sentenced for about 12 months in prison, I ended up with this funny thing in the British legal system that we have two types of courts. We have a magistrates court and a crown court. Now,
Okay.
magistrates tend to be local business people, or local people of the community, three of them, and
Oh, oh,
they sit in a court and they
okay.
decide smaller crimes to a maximum of 12 months in prison. Right? So
Okay.
they can't give you a sentence over 12 months. Crown Court are what we would call proper judges, and they are all barristers there. So we have solicitors and barristers like you would call lawyers. And you have to do
Okay.
so many hours to become a Crown Court judge. Now,
Oh, okay.
you can only be sentenced over 12 months if you go to
Okay.
Crown Court, but you have to,
Okay.
right? So I turn up on the day of court, and my solicitor's like, "Great news! You've got this basically this barrister in training to be a high court judge." She says, "And you've been referred to the court because they want to extend your sentence above 12 months. There's no way she'll send you to Crown Court because it will reflect badly on it. There's no way you're going to get more than 12 months." And and as it turned out, I walked in. There was no way she was sending. Yeah, 3 weeks before I was due to go to court, there was an overpopulation of people in prison. And the Home Secretary said, if it's somebody's first offence and it's not dangerous, do everything you can to avoid sending them to prison.
Oh, goodness. That's
So it's
great.
like,
They should
oh,
think that most of the time anyway, but
but,
okay.
but, but do you know what I mean? But we
Yeah.
have certain sentences in this country, certain crimes that if you commit, effectively, I think it's the same in any country. If you
Oh,
commit
sure.
a certain any crime, there's a set amount of time you're expected to have for it.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
get mitigating circumstances and stuff like that, which allow
Hmm.
a judge to either reduce or increase. But
Yeah.
the things like what should have been the worst experience of my life, the way the stars aligned in my favour, I walked
Hmm.
out of the court with just community service
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
instead of going
That
to
is
prison for
amazing.
more than 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in my 30s, I got to the point again where I was reconnecting with Source in a way that was more authentic to me.
Mm.
I got to the point where, well, I didn't get to the point, but the divine told me, he said, it said, the game of life is your game,
Yeah.
right? It is rigged for you to win. Whatever you perceive to be a setback is only a setup. Uh, it is a thing that will catapult you into greatness. So whatever happens, take it in stride, stay along with me.
Mm.
I've got you covered. And I have found that to be true. Um, Recently some things happened that I saw it coming because obviously I'm a card reader, right? I saw it coming and I knew I couldn't stop it, but it doesn't, you see a storm coming, you can wear gear, but you're still going to be impacted one way or another, right?
You can only
And
find shelter.
so,
That's it.
right, you can only find shelter, but the storm is still there, and you got to
Yeah.
deal with the repercussions of what happens to in the storm. And so I find myself in this interesting place right now, where I'm dealing with the consequences of that storm, but I also find myself remembering what I was told, all those many years ago. The game of life is your game, and it's already rigged for you to win. There is no way for you to lose. Everything, even perceived losses, are just a setback for it's a setup for your comeback, or to a way to just kind of catapult you further into greatness, and I hold on to that and I remember that.
It's because you get these weird things. It's like I was traveling recently, and British Airways
Hmm.
were lucky enough to lose all my luggage. And and by the time I got back to, because I went to see some friends in Munich and do the Christmas markets and stuff.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so by the time I got back to the UK, it's just like, they're like, "We've got your luggage." I'm not in the UK. I'm not in Munich anymore. I'm not in Germany. I'm in the UK. I wrote that
Right.
on the forms. And
Hmm.
that same week, I had a problem with my car that's supposed to be under warranty. And they said it's not. And he
Hmm.
told me the price for this part, and I literally told him to F off over the phone. And because it's just like, there's no way I'm paying £260 for a parking sensor. And anyway, like last Friday, my luggage just turned up. I got a phone call. "We got your luggage now. Can we drop it off at your house?" "Yeah, you can." And of course, it was full of presents and chocolates for the people that I'd gone to see. Well,
Yeah.
I replaced them and just sent them over. So now I've got this rucksack full of chocolates. Well, I may as well divide them up amongst the family. We'll eat them. And
Sure.
and I was chasing up this guy at B&W today because
Hmm.
like it's been going on for a couple of weeks, just trying to get. And he said through the quote, the price he quoted me, even though I think it should still be under warranty, was for the whole job, including all the labour and taxes. But on the phone, he told me it was just for the part, and I was just like, but when I look at it, it's the same week I'd just come back from Munich, and my brain was in this place of, you know what I mean? Everything is a hassle, everything is costing money, everything blah blah. But everything had
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
been delayed now, and
Yeah.
everything's,
Yeah.
oh look, we're back to normal, and
Yeah.
nothing has inconvenienced you anywhere near as much as you think it had.
Yeah, yeah. That moment, that power of reflection where
Yeah,
you are able to step outside of yourself, and outside of the circumstances of your situation, and have gain perspective is
yeah,
powerful.
it
Yeah,
is,
it's very
and
powerful.
and I don't think like when people say to me, I because I do coach and stuff and things like that.
Okay.
And um, when people talk about spirituality and stuff like that, and I say to people, I think people attach too much to karma, past life stuff, and I don't mean ignore it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but s- when people talk, oh yeah, but it can anchor you down. Yeah, but at some point you have to raise the anchor so you can move on. Whereas if you're constantly
Mm-hmm.
focused at staring at the anchor in the seabed, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
become part of the scenery. You know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you got, and I use the analogy of a hot air balloon, and that
Okay.
because a hot air balloon will rise and energy will rise.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but if you look at sandbags that hold the hot air balloon to the ground,
Uh-huh.
you have to let them go to keep rising.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
every now and again, when you feel yourself, you're lifted and you're at a certain place, but you
Mm-hmm.
feel yourself, you're weighed down with something, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just understand that your energy is still where it is, but you're now aware that there's a weight, some
Yes.
something you need to work with, something that is
Mm-hmm.
going to become repetitive, something that's going to come back around. But you are
Mm-hmm.
still flying. But
Yes. That
also,
part.
yeah, also what you're noticing is a change in altitude. And you maybe need to get used to that altitude before you can let a little bit more go so you can rise a little bit higher. You can't
I
go
love
straight
that.
to the stars because you
I
don't know.
love
Do
that.
you know what I mean? You have to
Yeah,
you
you need
have to
time to
learn.
adjust.
Yeah, yeah, you do. Your body needs, people will talk about energy, energy, and energy. Yeah, yeah, but you're in a physical body. And if you're
Yes.
fit, if every part, molecule, atom, photon, part of your DNA is at a certain
Hmm.
energy, but
Hmm.
you can't just decide to go straight to the stratosphere because your
No.
physical body's just going to go, oh, well, we're not here anymore. What's the point? You
Yes.
know,
Yes. Yeah.
that frequency, however people want to call it, that has to have time to
Hmm.
adapt. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
an exercise regime, and I think sometimes when people are going through their toughest moments, especially
Hmm.
physically. It's because your body is having to adapt, it's having to change.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
until
That's
that
very
the
true.
body goes through that adjustment of the new frequency. And
Hmm.
you know, like again, if I look at animals, things like lizards, spiders, snakes, crabs, and
Hmm.
all, they have to shake off a shell. They have to shed a skin, and
That is true.
it's a difficult time. You know, people always you see it. I call them Pinterest sunset quotes because right, there's a cynic in me. Because like people talk about a butterfly, it's a caterpillar, then it's a pupae, and then it becomes this beautiful butterfly. Yeah, yeah. Struggles, then gets
Oh
to
my
fly.
gosh.
You know,
Yes.
every time
Yes,
a snake
absolutely.
grows, every time a crab grows, you know, and stuff like that, eventually they have to shed something. And during that
Right.
shedding period is when they're most vulnerable and when they feel at their weakest. Well, why would it be
Yeah.
any different for us?
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's a very powerful statement, David. Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know,
Because I think, and we talked about this just a little while ago when we were
yeah,
talking about, we get so, things are good and we get so comfortable that we don't have adversity that makes us work out our muscles, whether
yeah,
that's mental, spiritual, physical, whatever. And so I, I remember when I was in church, one thing that they would say, and the Bible says this too, is when you're going through diverse trials, count it all joy,
yeah,
right? Count it all joy because it's all working out ultimately for your good. Not saying that those scriptures are in the same place, but just for purposes of understanding, like you're going through this, but look toward what will ultimately be the good in this experience, right? For
mm,
me, I know, without going into detail, I know this thing happened, that I saw coming, but as I've been going through this, the opportunities that I've been given, the lessons that I've learned, the things I've been able to do as a result of it, the people I've been able to help, I would have never been able to do that had this one thing that I was not happy about, in totality. Well, I guess I should say I wasn't happy about how things unfolded. Um, but had that thing not happened, all these other things would not have happened, right? And I wouldn't
yeah.
give anything for that.
I, I,
It's like, oh, just in time, right? It all happens just in time.
yeah, I was listening to somebody, and I'm going to paraphrase this badly, so I'll apologize in advance. But they were talking about the story of Solomon and how
Okay. Yeah.
Solomon asked for wisdom,
Hmm.
not riches, not power,
Right.
asked for
Hmm.
wisdom. And
Right.
when he got wisdom, he got all of the riches, all of the gold, all of the land, and all of the power. And it came with
Right.
wisdom. And it's the lesson is that if you ask to be brave, you need something that will make you face your fears. If you want to be wise, then you have to learn lessons.
Yeah.
And I've never met anybody that was wise without hindsight. You know?
Oh, yeah, that's the only way to get it because
Exactly.
information information is everywhere.
Mm.
Information is everywhere. We have information overload. What we fail to have is a, succinct application of that information in a way that creates positive change or growth, right? We haven't translated that into wisdom. And yeah, the only thing that happens to make take information to the wisdom stage is the pressing, right?
You are
Life is
some of the
happening.
ask some of the oldest, smartest people you know, and they'll tell you it took a lot of mistakes to get this smart.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you know
They're
what I
like, no, I have younger siblings and we've had some conversations about things and I give them information and they're like, how do you, it seems like you know everything. No, I've just been through a lot, right?
mean?
I'm not, I'm not some great guru that just knows
Yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah,
information
yeah.
just dropped down.
And
No,
it's
I
it's like
have
you
been
know
breathing for a while.
when people are like, well, where does your faith come? What gets tested?
Oh, oh my gosh. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
It absolutely
you know
gets
we were talking
tested.
at the beginning. How do you know good if you don't know how evil? How do you know
Yeah.
faith if you've never had it tested? You know,
Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah.
can wake up smiling on a sunny day.
Anybody. Hmm.
You know, and the
It's
problem we
whether or
have is
not you keep that.
yeah, and today there's a lot of focus on people who don't smile when the sun is shining, and you just like that's your problem. You just it's. I probably go on about it like a stuck record, but I talk about grandparents, my grandparents, and just people from 100 years ago, right? That their idea of happiness and being content. There's a roof over my head, I have food on the table, and I have clothes on my back. I'm living a good
Yeah.
life.
And they don't
That
even need to have a full closet. If you've ever been to an old house,
Yeah, yeah,
closets are super small,
tiny,
you
yeah.
know?
They
Yeah.
you know, they genuinely 100% felt
Mm-hmm.
grateful and blessed if they
Mm-hmm.
had a roof over their head that kept the weather out.
Yeah.
Everybody in their family was healthy. There's food on the
Yes.
table today.
Yeah.
They didn't
Yeah.
care about whether they had food coming in next month. It's like, do I have food
Yeah.
on the table today, and is there food in the cupboard for tomorrow? Yeah. We are a
Yeah.
blessed family. We are doing well.
Oh my God. Oh, absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
they
People.
lived that as a life, whereas today,
Mm-hmm.
people are getting upset because they don't have the latest smartphone, and the smartphone might not even be, you know what I mean? I see people get upset because they see there's a new smartphone coming out in 2 months' time, and they don't even know if they'll be
Yeah.
able to afford it. So it's not even available. If you were the
Right.
richest person in the world, you wouldn't be able to have it in your hand right now. But then, but yeah, but what if I can't get it? Do you know what I mean? And just like,
Life
and so,
goes on. There's a
yeah,
lot of people who don't have it, and it's not stopping life.
yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just I was having I don't know why. It's probably something's going to change soon, but I've been having a lot of reflection about my job because I have a full-time job where I work with people with
Sure.
head injuries and stuff like that. But my
Oh.
job's shift pattern, so I work 3 days a week. So that gives me 4 days a week
Okay.
to do coaching, hypnosis, and podcasts.
Oh
Right,
my goodness.
right.
Yeah.
But it's like, and there's this funny thing, and you're going to understand this extremely well, I promise you. Last year, I've been doing this podcast for 4 years now. It'll be 5 years. I
Congratulations.
think it's like 5 years in April. And last year, I'd got to a point where it was becoming a real struggle. But I used to work lots of weird shift patterns. So trying to
Okay.
plan ahead, it wasn't difficult, but I was always working different days.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I got to a point and I just started like, I don't know if I can keep doing this podcast. I just don't know if I have the energy. It's a hassle
Yeah.
getting guests. You get
Mm-hmm.
so many rejections, it just doesn't work out. And then I just like, I just let it go. I just like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, if it's not fixed by the end of the year, I'm just going to give up
Mm-hmm.
on the idea of doing podcasts. And
Yeah.
and this was like the begin, and I know it was the beginning of September because I then went on my surfing holiday for a couple of weeks. And literally
Okay.
by the time I came back,
Mm-hmm.
I had people contacting me from companies saying, "We've got this author, would you talk to them on your podcast?" And I was just like, okay. By the end of
Oh.
October, I was fully booked up into 2024, like January
Oh my
2024.
gosh.
Yeah, yeah. And at the same
Okay.
time, my job changed, so I only worked every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursdays.
Oh my gosh. So you
And it
had
just,
time to
yeah,
do
it just
it.
all lined up. But it's taken me this
Mm-hmm.
long, well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
up until the last couple of months to realize, while I'm moaning about my job sometimes, how lucky I've become because
Mm-hmm.
everything lined up. And
Yeah.
I've done more podcasts in 2024 and spoken to more people in 2024 than I had in 4 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was
Well,
at like,
I'm honored to be a part of that 2024 success.
yeah, but
Oh
did you mean
yeah.
it's just like, oh right, the bell
Yeah.
curve is suddenly going like
Yeah.
that because, but
Yeah.
I can't explain what the difference is, but something changed and
Mm-hmm.
everything aligned.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with that alignment, my job changed, the
Mm-hmm.
days changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even my idea. It was other people like, oh, we'd prefer it if we could do fixed shifts. And I've spent
Uh-huh.
16 years working different days every week. Do you know what I mean? So
Oh
it was
my
just like,
goodness.
so it was a big adjustment for me that I was the one that was reluctant to change, but it was exactly what I needed to do. And as soon as I
Yes.
did it, as soon as I accepted that change,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it just, I got suddenly like I don't know how you got on. Like, that there was a website that I saw you as a guest, so I applied and said, like, actually, I'd like to talk to you. They contacted me in January of this year saying, "Could you put your podcast on our website?" Do you know what I mean? And all these, yeah, yeah. So
Right.
there was all these people. Suddenly, I got discovered, and all these people are contacting me. saying, we've got
Oh
guests for
my
your podcast. Would you be
gosh.
interested? I spent nearly 4 years struggling. Like, I'd send out 50 emails and get
Mhm.
49 rejections. Yeah.
Oh
But it's that
my gosh.
adversity. If you want something, you're
Hmm.
going to be tested
Yeah,
for it.
that's very true.
And
That is very true.
because everybody wants something. Okay, well, how much do you want it? How much are you going to persevere?
Hmm.
How much you and but it's like I said, while all this is happening, it was only about a couple of months ago. I was just like, bloody hell, everything aligned for you, didn't it?
Hmm. Hmm.
But there was a
I
part of
agree
me
with you.
that's still moaning and complaining about the old life. It's like you're not even in that life anymore.
It takes some time to get adjusted.
And this is that thing about energy, and
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
energy has to change. And when the energy changes, then the thought patterns can change, the beliefs can change, you the
Yes.
understanding, because
Yeah.
it's hindsight. I didn't
Yes.
see it while
Yes.
it's actually happening to me in the moment, and I'm supposed to be this
Hmm.
guy who can knows what's going on in his life. I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be
Hmm.
organized, connected, and spiritual, and
Hmm.
I know the world, I understand
And
the
you're
universe.
still human. You're
Yeah,
still
yeah, it
human.
turns out
Things
I've got
still
all these
happen.
flaws, you know and
Imagine that.
but while it's happening to me in the moment, I'm not sat there looking at the way the universe is
Mhm.
lining up, changing everything
No.
for me, thinking, wow, I'm blessed. I'm moaning like mad that my life has to change. While
Oh yeah.
sitting there meditating, imagining, use, trying to
Yeah.
manifest this change, this great change that I
Hmm.
want to suit this lifestyle I want, this life I want. It's all
Yeah.
actually unfolding in front of me. And
Yes.
I'm and I'm
Yes.
sat there blind, holding,
Yeah.
clinging on for dear life. And there's this like tornado trying to rip me out of my position to take me to
Yeah.
another place. And I'm clinging on, you know.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like, this is what you asked for, David. This is, and you get, and it's all turned up.
Yeah.
But it took months after it happened.
Hmm.
I had this really big moment. Like I said, in January, I think it was January, February this year, I'd suddenly completed over 100 podcasts, and it passed me by. I was oblivious to it because I was just, and then I suddenly like, oh, hang on a second. Did you know what I mean? In the space of like this, and like I said, the podcast progression was slow, and then it sped
Yeah.
up massively.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
it happens so fast and so quickly. I never
Hmm.
noticed 100 podcasts as a milestone.
Hmm. Wow. Well, first of all, congratulations on the
Thank
100
you.
episodes of a podcast and
Yeah,
your success. As a person who started a podcast uh,
yeah,
on a whim from a friend, I'm an introvert. I think I've said this to you before. So me doing this, like starting my own podcast
yeah.
in that way was just
So
a
here's
big
something.
push for me.
Here's something that's going to surprise you, right? Well, it won't
What's that?
surprise you because we're talking. The reason although I'd always wanted to do a podcast, the
Hmm.
reason I finally got one,
Hmm.
finally just, do you know what, I'm doing it. I don't care, because
Yeah.
I realised I'd got fearful of what people thought of me.
Oh.
And so I basically challenged myself to learn to talk to strangers because I was petrified of it.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah.
See, my podcast I've made it about the episodes that I've done really is to help people be comfortable talking to a tarot card reader
Yeah.
outside of the entertainment space, right?
Yeah.
And to show people how a tarot card reader uses tarot in her own life, right?
But,
So many people see it as entertainment. I'm like, this is not entertainment for me. This
mm,
is my
yeah.
lifestyle,
Yeah.
right? So
But
go ahead.
it took a podcast for me to be
Hmm.
comfortable telling
Yeah.
telling people about the skeletons in my closet, telling people that I
Oh,
love
yeah.
tarot, I love horoscopes,
Yeah.
I love the
Yes.
universe, I love the chakras. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm
Yeah.
supposed to be this, because there's a part of me that's a very logical, cynical, grumpy 50-year-old man. Sure.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? Who
Yeah.
like misses the fact that we can't slap our kids anymore, because I think that was a good thing once. But at the same time, I'm like love and compassion, because Jesus and the universe is all one thing, and we should be
Yeah.
love and kindness. And I
Yeah.
realize that there's
And we should.
complexities to life, and life isn't
There are.
simple. And
That is absolutely true.
but it took a long time to just actually. Do you know what I want? I don't want to be afraid of talking, because I realized there was this kind of lack of self-worth, that I'm not good enough. I'm not, you know. So a lot of it comes from like that fear of being judged. you know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so
I can
so
see
right,
that.
so what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to put myself in the way of the traffic and just go with the flow. And but this
I love
idea,
that. There's bravery. Yeah.
but this idea that I'm confident and extrovert is
Hmm.
completely false. If I was meeting you in real life, if I was to
Hmm.
fly over, because I'm in the UK, so if I was to fly
Okay.
over to America to meet you, it'd be an
Uh-huh.
8 hour journey of what worried about what you might think of me when you met me.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
but
interesting.
for some reason, the minute I turn and say, "Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you?" This ultra ego can take over.
Interesting.
But
That is
but as
very
I talk
interesting.
about that, as I'm telling you
Hmm.
this, there's a part of me that's
Hmm.
tying up in knots and gets nervous about it. But
Well, you
that
should not.
no, but
You should
that's
not.
the
You're
bit
amazing.
there. But there's that bit of me that's like, no, no, this
Yeah.
is the challenge. This is what you have to overcome
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
next part of that is understanding. And like, so now I understand. It's just the difference between me, you, and that other person is you're
Hmm.
expecting this
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it's my
Hmm.
podcast. So you're expecting to meet this guy that is easy to talk to, is going to be interested in you, is going to wants to learn about you,
Hmm.
you know. And
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
understanding that people have never met you. People all have these fears.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
That is very true. That's
you
very
know,
true.
and so if you never asked for it, by the way, but my advice was just based on this conversation is understand your podcast will tune into the people that want to learn about tarot, want to learn about your energies, want to learn about how you teach people, how you love people,
Yeah.
and because the thing that will come out, as you may know, my passion is talking and listening to
Oh,
people and talking to people.
yeah.
As,
Yeah. Yeah.
as passionate as you can be about tarot is exactly who will
Yeah.
tune in and love you for it.
Yeah. Well, with even with my podcast, right? So I again, my use of tarot is really about me living my lifestyle
Yeah,
outwardly, right?
yeah,
And I am what my friends called an extroverted introvert.
yeah.
I I love people and I can chat and talk all day long. Um, but after I chat and talk all day long,
I
then I
love
need some
closing the
time with
door.
my tarot cards. It's like I love you.
Yeah,
I'll give you all I've got while I'm out here.
yeah.
But after that, it's like reel it in and let me just be me. But for doing the podcast, it was really me putting myself out there because, like most of us,
Mm,
who this is a lifestyle for us, um, I have a a life in the corporate world outside of the metaphysical world that
yeah,
I live, and my position is a very powerful position, and so my concern was that people would have this idea
yeah.
that I was using superpowers on them in the workplace, right? And it's
Mm,
like, oh, sweetie, if you were only so important for me to,
yeah.
utilize that sort of energy for you. No, I'll
Yeah,
just use the corporate stuff because that's,
yeah.
I don't have to I
So,
don't have to tie my energy to you. It's not that at all. And so for a long time, years, it's like I was what they call a closeted practitioner. And it wasn't until there was a push where I saw that people really needed me that
mm,
I came out of the closet of,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
because I was reading for my friend at her store, but that was just, one day or 2 days a
yeah,
month,
yeah,
and it was just for a couple of hours and nobody knew. But then there were things that changed, right? Like the government here in the US changed, and if you were making more than $600 in a year doing anything, if it was coming through like PayPal or whatever pay plan, you had to start a business, right? And I'm thinking, here I am trying to help people with this spiritual thing, and they are giving me, an offering or a tip.
yeah,
And now I've got to do this government thing where compliance costs more than what people are gifting me. And it's like, oh my gosh. So I'm like, okay, well, let me start a podcast and connect with people so, they know that I'm here and available. But it was just like you said, it was like a push to grow myself. It's like, okay, here
yeah.
I am. I'm out here now.
Uh,
And it's interesting because you find that the very people who are like, oh, I don't know, I don't believe in that or whatever, they're the very ones who listen to your podcasts and watch your videos, and
the,
it's
the,
like, wait a
I,
minute, what's happening right now?
as you and I were talking there, I remember more coincidences. Like I had tried doing podcasts before, but I was always trying to team up with somebody, and I'd
Mm,
done businesses in the past where I tried to team up with somebody, and it
yeah,
never worked. It never worked. And then one day I
yeah,
just like, if you want this, if this is what you want, you have to do it. You can't be
Yeah,
always trying to get someone to go in with you. You have to do it on your own. And
that's a powerful move.
yeah, and at the same time, coincidentally, the first lockdown happened, and everybody suddenly was like, everybody got Zoom, whereas before that, nobody wanted Zoom. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I'll just do my podcast via Zoom.
Hmm.
I don't need a studio anymore. I don't need a, and at that point, it's just then like, okay, how much work are you prepared to do just reaching out to people on Instagram, emailing people
Yeah.
and building
Yeah.
up and asking people if you know somebody that'd like to be on a podcast, could you do an
Yeah.
introduction? Just,
Yeah.
but the step was, oh, the problem is you're always looking to team up with other people. You're going to have to
Hmm.
do it on your own. If it's what you
Yeah,
want, you
which
have to
is
do it.
why most of my podcast episodes are just me chatting with my public because, you're on these social media platforms. I found
Yeah.
that to be true just like you, and
Mm.
everybody says, "Oh, I want to be on a podcast. I want to be on a podcast." And you extend the invitation and then people are it's crickets, ghost town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's responding or they respond and then you try to schedule with them and then.
Yeah.
And so I just said, "You know what? That conversations with a card reader is just going to be that, right? It's just going to be, as long as I do it, it'll just be me talking to people about whatever's going on with me when I have a chance to do the podcast, when I have a
Yeah.
chance to put a video out there. Um, and so I just found that I had to find what worked for me, right? Because social media will put the pressure on you again with being
Mm.
authentic. Social media, I felt social media, especially in the world of tarot, people are doing these tarot videos, doing readings every day for all 12 astrological signs and all this other stuff. My engagement, my personality is not a personality of entertainment. And I had to come to the point where I'm just like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing
Yeah.
the videos? Why am I doing the podcast? And it's like, I just want to educate away the fear of using tarot,
Yeah.
right? This is my lifestyle. I need to also, I also wanted to share with people that it's completely okay to read tarot and not be like an entertainer and not and to have just a regular life. For some reason people have this idea that if you use divination that's your life's that's your work, that's your business, and it's like no, it's no different than you going to church or you going out running with your friends. That's not what you do for revenue and income. It's
It's
what you do as a part of your well-being.
but it's funny, isn't it? It's when you look at like if you take YouTube, like horoscope readers, tarot readers, millions of
Mhm.
subscribers, millions of viewers. When
Yes, yes.
whenever there's some mediumship reading nearby at the local spiritualist church, it's always packed. Try getting a ticket. But you ask anybody to their face, no, I don't do that. I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like,
Isn't it funny the shame still exists?
yeah,
I this is it's not a well, I'll just say it. Um there are some people who are close to me who uh at one time deemed my lifestyle as um as inappropriate, right? Until right? Until uh, one of these people, they lost somebody close to them died, right? And then the other time, they were going through, another person was going through a heartbreak, and another person had lost their job. And I find it very interesting to your point where, oh, I don't do that. I don't do that. Nobody does it until they need you,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So your person passed away. Now you're coming to the person who you previously maligned, right?
yeah,
You're a horrible person. How dare you do that? Oh my God, my sister passed away. Can you connect us? And I'm like, that's kind of not how mediumship works. It's not like I can pick up a phone and they're on
yeah,
dial a dead person. That's not how that works.
yeah,
But I'll certainly do what I can to communicate, right? Um, or I'll certainly do what I can to connect with my divine counsel to get you the answers that you seek using the divination tools that I have. But I find that very interesting how people are naysayers until life happens. And then we're the first people they come running to,
yeah,
undercover, of course,
yeah.
because when they see you in public, they would never, unless we're talking about, something that's non-divinatory.
I
But I've,
find
I've come to the point where I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I find it interesting because when I qualified as a hypnotherapist a few years ago, and
Congratulations.
yeah, none of my friends are interested. Not one.
None.
None.
Hmm.
None at all. None of them interested at all.
Hmm.
Um, and the same with the podcasts. None of them ever asked me about
Hmm.
guests or anything like that.
Hmm.
And occasionally I'll talk about, because I'll have somebody will talk about something, and what I've got a friend of mine who's all into the military stuff like that, and I've said, oh, I had this guy on, John, really nice bloke. He had an encounter when he was in Iraq. Blah blah blah. Stonewall silence. He's not going to listen to the podcast. He doesn't want to, because and one of them said to me, he said, the thing is, David, we don't see a podcaster talking to a guest. We see you.
Huh,
And he said, and
interesting.
yeah, but but I sort of
Yeah.
I kind of get what they're saying, because they're just like, we're not going to watch you. I have one friend who surprised me, because I rarely see him anymore because he's moved, but he said he does listen to some of my episodes,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
he was, if you would have asked me for a list of people, he would have been at the bottom of the list. So it was a good reminder not to
See,
judge people.
don't they
Yeah,
surprise you? They
yeah,
surprise you.
yeah.
They absolutely surprise you. I've had a couple of people on my podcast, friends of mine who we share this lifestyle. Um, and but for the most part, I do my podcast solo. And I did figure out that there were people who, um, even in my workspace, who found out about my lifestyle. Again, me coming out of the closet a couple of years ago, who actually watch my videos and watch my podcasts. And
Yeah.
I was very surprised by that. Um, but what I did find out though is that those some of those same people who they become more guarded, right? And there are certain things that they are afraid to talk to you about because as a medium, they're always thinking that I'm somehow tapped into them and talking to their dead relatives around them. And I'm like, no, I don't stay wide open like that. I got a life
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
live,
But
right?
it's like that because when people, um, one of the things that people don't really understand about hypnotherapists um, is you read people, you read their faces, because,
Mm.
right? But
Mhm.
it's like, so you read in my mind now? No, no, because I'm having a conversation
Yes.
with you. I'm not in
Yeah.
hypnotherapist mode. You haven't come to me for a session. You know what I mean?
Right. We don't have that energetic connection or contract. That's
Yeah,
not what
yeah.
we're doing.
You know,
I'm
you know,
peopling. We're peopling together right now.
yeah, yeah. I have an off switch the same as everyone else.
Yes.
It's the same as I
Yeah.
have an on switch. And
Yes. Yes.
it's just like, because like when I'm coaching and stuff like that, and I talk about, like, here's the trick to the podcast, right? And again,
Hmm.
this is what I'd say to anybody. My only goal is my belief that if somebody has a passion, everybody is interested if you'll listen to them. So just listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't do anything else. Just listen. And when you
Hmm.
listen, what I find happens is occasionally something will pop into my head to ask.
Yeah.
But if I just listen, as they come to an end, I'll find there'll be something that I'm interested in. I want to dig deep and I want to know. Do you know what I mean? I have
Yes.
no preset questions. I never, when I get
Yeah.
sent the PR junkets and all of that, I scan it so I know your name. And I scan it to
Yeah.
see if there's anything that literally stands out that might be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
but I
because it allows for a natural flow of conversation.
yeah,
It
and
allows for us to just sit here and people together
yeah,
to have a conversation.
and
Yeah.
and this is like, it's like at the beginning of this conversation, you were telling me about the book and what you did and stuff like that. And when that came to kind of a natural conclusion, I asked you about your upbringing. And when
Yeah.
did you get it? And you told me about your grandmother, and do you know what I mean? And do you know what I mean? It's just like, so where did it start? And I say, where
Yeah.
does it start? And then I just fold my arms and listen. And we're
Yeah.
now just talking like we've been friends for 20 years. Do you
Yes.
know what I mean? We could be in a coffee shop just chatting, having a
Yeah.
cup of coffee, or in a bar having a
Absolutely.
beer.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? That's what I mean. It's
Absolutely.
just, you know, it's
And that's the
that's
good part about it.
it's not difficult. It's really simple. It's this thing, like
Hmm.
you and I keep saying, you have to stop. I'm going to say this with the caveat of I don't practice what I preach, but you have to stop overthinking You have to stop trying to like force the universe to roll the wheels. Let it. The universe
Mhm.
is, you know, as that
Yeah.
Frank Ladd said to me the other day, that the quantum probability guy. The universe is an
Mhm.
explosion 15 billion years ago. It knows what it's doing. It doesn't need your
Yeah.
help, David.
No, no.
You just let it know what
Speaking of
you
not
want.
needing your help, yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Speaking of not needing your help, I remember when I started reading for people, and this is when I used to read for people for free. And people, it's interesting how people have the audacity to say all manner of things to a card reader
Yeah,
about the illegitimacy of the industry of divination
yeah.
or the abilities of divination, right? And I remember in the early days being so disappointed in people and constantly trying to um, provide validation
Mm,
for the divine. Well, more so validation for them that the divine loved them and heard them and was answering them, and had not forsaken them. And I would do that by reading for them for free. And they'd be like, "Oh, I don't believe that. I saw in the US there was a woman, they called her Miss Cleo, and she did tarot like on TV or whatever, and she did like commercials back in the 80s or 90s. And they're just like, yeah, I remember Miss Cleo, and you know what you're doing is no different. And I'd be like, well, let me show you, that that this is real, right? And that the answers aren't coming from me because I don't know you, you don't know me. Let's just sit down and I do a reading. And I would do that to show them again that the divine loves them, is there for them, and has constantly been answering their questions. They just weren't listening, they weren't tuned in. But also, I would be like defensive for on this on the side of the divine, like how dare
mm,
they,
yeah,
you know? And then the divine was like, I don't need you to defend me. I got this. And I'm
mm,
like, oh,
yeah.
all right. And so it allowed me to love people better through that because I would be, a little bit upset, like, you know,
It's
how dare
just,
you say that about the divine,
mm,
and let me show you.
yeah,
And the divine would give them the information, but it didn't give me the freedom to appreciate what I had done for them because I've given them the reading. Now they believe, but now I'm still pissed,
yeah.
right? Because you had the audacity to question the divine when I know better. And now you've sat here before me and I've read you your
And
life.
the divine
And
is
you're
like,
like, oh
girl.
my God.
Yeah, the divine's like, girl. I created mountains before I created people. Okay,
Right.
you think I need? But yeah, okay, yeah. I need you to have my back. Don't worry, I'll deal with this person.
Right. And I figured that out early on. The divine was like, I don't need you, Tony, to defend me.
Yeah,
That's fine. Let me give you what I need to tell this person.
yeah.
And so I did find, and this is why I
It's
started
hard
charging
though, isn't it?
people.
It is hard though
Yeah,
sometimes, and somebody
it is
comes, they
hard.
come to you because
Yes.
I'm in desperate need, and people like I get this sometimes when I'm coaching, and I've been rude to some clients because it's just like,
Oh,
yes, sorry, it's like,
listen, I understand.
yeah, do you know what I mean? And I'm quite blunt as a coach, do you know what I mean? Because
Okay.
because
Well, and
some
when coaching, you have to, because sometimes
because
people are
some people are
telling
idiots.
themselves bullshit. Yeah,
Yeah. They talk shit to
it's true.
themselves, and it's just
Yes.
like it's
And they're
just like
believing it.
yeah, and sometimes they kind of need a verbal slap round the face. It's like
Yeah.
there's this line I use. I can listen to somebody for half an hour, and I just like, look, when you look back at everything we discussed, there's a common
Mm-hmm.
denominator, and that's you. So maybe you're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
I'm not the smartest man in the room, but it's no shit, sir. It's written in the sand in 20-foot letters. You are your problem. You know? And 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 this is the thing is it's just like yeah, I've said that. It's just like
I know. I've thought it. I've sat in a reading and thought it, like, come on.
but this is what I mean. Somebody will go to the trouble of making an appointment to come and see you. Right? They will tell you their heartfelt problems, and you will be like, "Wow, yeah, no, I get that." And like genuinely, I don't think people always understand that if somebody has the ability to listen to you, it can be really draining sometimes because they sit in your shoes whether you believe it or not, and
Yes,
they really do. You know, you will try to actually, as you're listening, to understand that place they come from, and if you're tuning in for somebody, it actually does really help to kind of understand the energy they're coming from, because that helps you, that connection
absolutely.
helps the energy expand, and the more that energy can
Yes.
expand and the more that you're tuned into them, the less you're thinking,
Yes.
and that as soon as you're not thinking, you
Hmm.
can hear, you can listen, you
That's
can,
when it happens. Yes.
yes, right. So
Yeah.
when they then start questioning, it's like, don't you in there, do you realize this, what I put myself through, and you came to me?
Yeah. I
I
tell
didn't
people
knock
all the
on
time, I'm
your
like, look,
Yeah, I didn't
I'm
knock
not
on
looking
your
for you.
dent.
You came
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
knock on your door
It's like,
saying, "This isn't any of my business." I thought I'd stick my nose in it. You come to me to tell me your business.
mhm,
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I got onto a little
I've told
rant then.
people. No, I listen, David, you and we are passengers in the same ship. I
Yeah,
have
yeah,
told people, and I actually say it on my website, this is not entertainment for me. This is real life and serious
yeah.
for me. And if you'll be honest with me and with the process, I will get you the information that you need. But when you connect with me, when you schedule an appointment with me, we've just entered into an energetic contract.
One hundred
I
percent.
am now obligated to connect with my divine source, who then connects with your divine angels or people in order to get you the information that you're coming to me for, right? And that is something I take very seriously,
One hundred
whether I'm
percent.
charging you or not,
Yeah.
right? I did start charging people though, because people, like you said, are ridiculous.
Mm,
And I noticed that people will come back to me for the same thing over and over again, and they will
yeah,
never take the advice. And I'm
yeah.
like, my time and energy, like you just said, I'm connecting with your
Mm,
energy.
mm.
I could be
And
doing something else with my energy.
yeah,
What are
and
you doing
also
right
as well,
now?
what people don't understand is if you make an appointment with you, if you're
Hmm.
having a bad day, if you wake up not feeling well, you understand you have a commitment to turn up. And
Yes.
regardless
Oh
of
my
what's going on
gosh.
in the world, like I said to you at the beginning of this, I will say, "Welcome to the David Watson podcast." And in that bit,
Yeah.
that's like it's like the, I call it the Elvis walk. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently there was this thing where Elvis used to talk about a 100-yard walk or something, and he
Okay.
wasn't he. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if it's true, but it was this that Elvis on stage was not Elvis Presley, but the walk between
Oh yeah.
backstage,
I've heard that.
yeah, so he
I've heard that.
turned into Elvis Presley from the walk from the back room
Hmm.
onto the stage. And it's a bit like
Yeah.
that for me. I did the
Hmm.
I'm just doing a sound check, I'm just doing this, and then it's like, okay, if you're ready, I'll do the
Hmm.
countdown. I'll do the countdown. It's
Hmm.
like, welcome to the David Watson podcast. And that at
Yeah.
that moment, that little 30-second segment of me going through that thing is switching
Hmm.
everything else off.
Yeah.
And everything
Yeah.
in my psyche, everything in my body, my mind knows, no,
Hmm.
no, you're now filming. And
Yes. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I've known that since I
Hmm.
got up this morning, that I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
anything else that's going on in the day is, oh yeah, but I'm doing my podcast this afternoon. I'm doing this. I'm
Hmm.
doing to do,
Hmm.
and this is what people, like, and when you're doing readings and stuff, it's just like, no, no, you have to understand, you've made an appointment with me. And since the day you made that appointment, that somewhere in my psyche,
Yes.
I'm turning up for that. It doesn't matter if I
Yeah.
don't feel well. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
if I'm having a crap time. It doesn't matter if I didn't sleep last night. I
Because the
know
reading is not even about me. I am
exactly.
literally the telephone,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah,
telephone does not say I'm not feeling well today.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
That
it
is
just,
very true.
you have to turn up. And this is what
Mhm.
people don't understand is that's the commitment we make.
Yes, because
And
it's about something greater than us, right?
yeah, but we always exactly that, because it's like, for want of a better term, it's a contract with God. I said,
Yes.
this is what I want to do.
Yes.
So God
Hmm.
said, you better turn up.
Oh yeah. And that when God's your boss, man, you
And
you
like
got
I
to get it
said, it's
together.
it's like I said, it's, the next stage must be coming, because I made a commitment like 4.5 years ago, whatever it was, and I kept going, I kept going, and kept going until I turned and said eventually, like, if this isn't meant for me, we're going to stop at the end of the year. And then
Yeah.
suddenly it came on in volumes where I realize now
Mhm.
I've just literally realized it as I'm talking to you. It's just unraveled in my head. Like, oh yeah, is I needed enough podcasts behind me to not worry about getting 20 applicants in a week,
Yeah.
because there's a point where
Milestones.
exactly. Whereas if I'd
Mhm.
have suddenly had 20 people want to talk to me, I'd have tried to cram them all in a week or in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas I
Yeah.
realized, no, 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 you're not doing any more than two a week. And if somebody has to wait, like now, I'm booking for February. If you have to wait till February, that's how it is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just
But it
like,
gives people something to look forward to, you know?
but
Yeah.
I now realize it took a long time for me to get into a place where I was comfortable enough to say, no, this is when you wait until. This is how it works.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know?
yeah, for sure. Because you'd previously had what felt like a deficit
Yeah.
that you didn't recognize was a learning process.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because I wouldn't have been able to cope
Yeah.
with all of those all of those people coming in. I'd never have been able to arrange it. But
Yeah.
it's just like God's like, well, you're going to have to do this for a few years so that I know you're serious, because we all want
Yeah.
things on a whim.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
What
and
did Les Brown say? Said that if you are casual about your dreams and goals will become a casualty.
yeah,
You know?
that is
It's
really good. It's like I said,
yeah,
it's like honestly, this has just kind of revealed itself as I'm talking to you. Is
sure.
when I was working different days every week, and it would have been really hard for me to plan a podcast months ahead.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
would I have coped with so many? Because you know, like arranging this podcast, I liaise with, is it Lynn Ford?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. And
Hmm.
so I had to liaise with her about where you were, what your timeline was, what your availability was, versus my availability and the different time zones. Because you're in Central Time,
Yes. Yeah.
I'm in the UK, I'm in England. You know,
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
it's early evening for me. It's morning, mid morning, nearly lunchtime for
Yeah.
you. You know,
Yeah.
so it's just like, how would I have done that on my old schedule?
Yes. Yeah. You
But
had
it's
to, the divine had to move some things around for you. It was a
yeah,
process.
but I had to show my commitment was true.
I love that. I love that. And
So,
I'm very excited to see how things are manifesting for you as you share with me your story and your journey
mm,
with the podcast. Now, you said you recently became licensed or certified for hypnosis. Did you
yeah,
do that after the podcast
yeah,
started?
yeah.
Wow.
I've been coaching on and off for about 20 years,
Okay.
and I've never really committed to it because for the last 16, 17 years I've been working with people with head injuries. So it's a much easier. I get paid to do it. I get paid to
Yeah.
coach people, you know. So I've never really worried too much about private practice. And when private clients come along, it's like, yeah, yeah, I'll schedule you in. You know, we can have some time together. And the same with hypnosis. The hypnosis was just really I wanted to learn. Do you know what I mean? Like just how powerful is the subconscious? How powerful is that mind?
Oh my gosh.
And again, like I said, because one of the things you learn is just really how much the subconscious is in control of everything, and how you
Hmm.
can rewire it to help you. Um,
Yeah.
and the funny thing is like there's so many illusions around hypnosis and what happens when you're under
Yes.
trance. It is, but
The
it's
level of fear that's in people to become vulnerable enough to use that as a
yeah.
tool for growth.
So
Hmm.
one of the things I explain to people about hypnosis is if you imagine I turn up at your local town and I hire a local hall, sell 200 tickets. Okay, so 200 people are going to turn up to see a hypnosis show.
Hmm.
20 people already know they want to volunteer to be on this stage,
Mm.
but 180 people are only turning up to watch. So when
Yeah.
that stage hypnotist, it's the same thing. When he says, "Can I have a volunteer?" and 20 people put their hand up, what he or
Hmm.
she is exceptionally good at is picking the 10 most enthusiastic people. And by the time you've walked onto that stage and sat down, you're 50% hypnotized because you've already convinced yourself it's
Interesting.
happening.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
Oh
if you
wow.
and I were to have an appointment to come and see me to do hypnosis,
Hmm.
50%
Hmm.
of it has happened before you walk through the door. Because what are you expecting? If I if
Yeah.
I if I book a reading with you,
Hmm.
I expect to turn up and get a reading. If you turn up
Yes.
to be hypnotized by me, you
Hmm.
expect to be hypnotized.
Sure. Sure.
To do me.
Absolutely.
And one of the
Yeah.
key things of understanding with hypnosis, unless you're exceptionally skilled and
Uh-huh.
have probably practiced for a long time, you will
Hmm.
not be able to hypnotize somebody that doesn't want to be hypnotized.
That is very interesting. I only know of two hypnotists,
Mm.
um, and they have shared a similar story that um,
What
hypnosis is some. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say what exceptionally good hypnosis people are very good at doing is using body language and words to take you down a road where you subconsciously start to relax without realizing they're doing it. But that is like top tier.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Those guys are masters, and
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you know a hypnotist, or had you ever been hypnotized? Like, what
No,
was
I'd never
thing
been
that pushed you to do that?
hypnotized. I'd always been interested, and I nearly trained to do it like about 20 years ago. Again, so it's funny how things come full
Okay.
circle. And I used to put out
Yeah.
these 1 minute motivation videos on Instagram. And
Okay.
a guy called Vinny Shawman, I don't remember how I met him. He's been on the Joe Rogan podcast a few times and stuff. He works with a lot
Hmm.
of fighters. It's when I started doing the podcast. I don't know how him and I started following each other on Instagram, but when I started doing the podcast, I just reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you like to come on mine?" You know what I mean? So he's done Joe
Oh,
Rogan,
nice.
and then I reached out to him and said, "Would you like to come on?" And he said yes. And
Absolutely.
and he was one of the first people I ever spoke to, and it was a terrible podcast really because we started talking, I forgot to even do an introduction, and and then a couple of months later, maybe a year later, him and I got kept in touch. He invited me up to do a timeline therapy as a guest to just experience it, and I enjoyed that, and it was quite interesting, and then again, then he was doing this course, like if you wanted to train to be a hypnotherapist. So I was just like, yeah, I would. And I then, I paid to go to actually go and work, go and learn under him and stuff like that. And yeah,
Interesting. And
yeah.
how long did it take you, especially with that schedule of yours? How long did it
No, no,
take you to go through?
he put everybody. You stayed at a hotel. You turned up on a early in the morning. It was 2 days intensive, like 12-hour days where
Oh
he
my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah, where he taught people how to do the trance, what you needed to learn and stuff like. Because one of the things he talks about is a lot of stuff that's just not relevant. They just like try to justify you've got to do
Hmm.
this for 6 months.
Hmm. Hmm.
That being said,
Hmm.
everybody in that room that I was in had
Hmm.
some sort of coaching experience, training. Like there was a
Sure.
lot of ex-professional Muay Thai fighters and stuff like that. People to do with me because he'd worked with a lot of fighters, and
Hmm.
and there were lots of MMA guys and or lots of PTs. So we were all in some way already coaches. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so if that's your community, that's who you're training, then
Y-
the learning curve is going to be severely reduced by for
Yeah,
those
well,
people. I can see that. Yeah.
yeah. So the room when you look at that room,
Hmm.
everybody understands the importance of mindset, the focus of mindset.
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
so we were, in fairness to, we were probably already 50% of where he needed people to be mentally, in terms of we understood how
Hmm.
important mindset is.
Oh,
And
for sure.
everybody in that room had already done some work with Vinny in one way or another.
Okay. All right.
So it's not
And
like
so,
you could just randomly, I'd like you to teach me to be a hypnotherapist. It was,
right.
you know.
So you were pretty much chosen to learn to be a hypnotherapist in
Yeah,
that
I
way.
guess so. But I mean, he was kind of selective in who he contacted, saying, "I'm doing this course, and who would like to learn."
Of course.
You
Of
know,
course. Especially with something like hypnosis. Um, the power of suggestion, uh,
it's
not
powerful.
suggestion,
No, it is.
it's
Everything is the power of suggestion.
yeah. So it's important that it's entrusted to people who will do the right thing with it.
Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know, very much like with tarot. Um, I have people all the time who ask me if I teach tarot and that sort of a thing. And while I don't formally teach tarot, I'm always interested in understanding why they want to learn tarot, right?
Yeah.
If they're just learning it so that they can then use it as a revenue source, or if they're learning it for personal growth. Because I find that a person's motivation for engaging something, especially something as powerful as divination, even though you can use anything for divination, um, is very key. And if I'm going to share my time, my knowledge, my effort, I want to know that it's more likely to be utilized for the good of humankind
Yeah.
as opposed to utilizing it to for the purposes of commercialization, commodification. And and I would be the first person to say that a workman is worthy of his hire, right?
Of
People
course.
do things, they learn, they've developed an expertise, or in my case, a relationship with the cards and with deity. Yeah, they're worthy of it. But I see so often in the world of divination where people utilize it for entertainment and commodification and self gain. It's like, I would, but I don't know if I want my soul attached to that. Let's talk about why you want to learn so I can understand why he would be selective
Yeah.
in who he chooses to
Mm.
teach hypnosis to. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's awesome that you got an opportunity to learn from somebody and can say, hey, I learned from this guy who's, world renowned, and,
Yeah. Yeah. He
and
is.
he's
He's
gracious.
yeah. He is a really nice guy, and he has worked with some incredible people. But that there that it was just really and it did help. It helped. Tell you that one of the things I've always admired about Vinny when with the times that the opportunities I had to work with him
Mhm.
is, and this is what I'm saying about people that like skill sets. We I
Yeah.
remembered on the day it was a massive learning curve for me because
Okay.
we're there and we'd obviously been doing some sort of like practicing something, and he's giving everybody their feedback around the room, and he gives me my feedback and he turns to walk away, and he must have seen something in my eyes as he stopped, spun straight round, and he just pointed straight at me. He said, "It's feedback, not criticism. Stop that." And at that moment, like all of these clogs that had started winding just ground to a halt. And like most of my adult life had flashed before me in a split second, where I realized that if I had taken so many things as criticism and never observed them as feedback. And
That's
he's,
powerful.
yeah, and he saw that in a microsecond.
I love that.
And I swear it would just been a flick of the eyes or
Uh-huh.
do you know what I mean? And it's just like,
Hmm.
and not only did he see it, he knew what it was.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and
And it's powerful not just to say, but it's powerful. I said it's powerful because I considered the impact
yeah,
of what his wisdom, his guidance, his
yeah,
mentorship
yeah,
meant, and how that worked for
and
you.
it ch-
That's
and it
amazing.
had a literal change in that moment that
Hmm.
then obviously over the next coming weeks and months digested, and
Hmm.
I realized how many conflicts I'd had in relationships, in my adult working life, where I viewed everything as criticism and didn't have the ability, maturity, understanding, whatever category label you want to put on it, to,
Hmm.
oh
Hmm.
no, those people were trying to help me. Those people were giving me feedback.
Yeah. And that's a very nuanced experience or
Yeah,
space to be too,
yeah,
because some people are giving criticism,
mm,
especially I mean, with having access to the internet. There's so many people who are willing to say
yeah,
something in typing but would never
yeah.
say that to your
And
face. Yeah.
but here's the gravity of that moment, and
Sure.
this is the I'm I've actually paid somebody for their skill set. I've
Yes,
paid
for
them for
sure.
their expertise. I've
Hmm.
paid them to teach me something. And
Hmm.
in the moment of them giving me some vital teaching, I switched into who's this guy criticizing me?
Victim mode.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Victim in defense.
I'm there and I've paid my money and I've done all of this to
Hmm.
listen to him, to learn from him.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I turned it into a negative. while he's actually teaching me the very thing I've turned up and guaranteed a commitment to do to him
Why
and
do
to
you
me.
think that we do that?
So I victimhood is a powerful thing. One of the things I learned again much later, and it's funny how the universe will send something to you. I was watching one of those reels on Instagram, YouTube, or somebody sent it to me. It was Jordan Peterson talking for like a minute,
Okay. Okay.
and I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is, the professor guy, the psychologist, and he was talking about, especially with adults, males, if they had a bad
Okay.
relationship with their father, they will often see other males as their father. So when that male chastises them, criticizes them, tries to give them feedback, they're suddenly a little boy who's angry at their dad.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I
I'm
was
gonna have
just
to look
like,
this guy up.
yeah, and I was just like, oh wow, oh yeah. And then I suddenly seen this correlation. Whenever I had female managers, I always did better than when I had male managers
Okay, so why was that? What was the
because
correlation?
because
Like,
every
do you
time
have a
I got
good relationship with your mom?
yeah, I have a good relationship with my mum. I don't have a relationship with my dad really. So every time,
Okay.
if I had certain managers, if I felt they were challenging me, subconsciously I've become a little boy who's basically ready to have an argument with his dad.
That is so interesting, David.
Mm.
That is
Whereas,
very interesting.
yeah, and so they were probably doing nothing different than any of the female managers that I've had over the years. It's just
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
perception, my view, and I'm not
Yeah,
taking it on the same way. So my
that was a
reaction is
powerful
different.
growth moment for you.
Huge, but it would never have happened if Vinnie Shawman hadn't spotted that one thing. And yet I'd probably been in that position 100 times and never realized it.
That is so in my head what's happening right now, David, is I'm thinking about the men in my life and how they interact.
Yeah. And so the reflection was that thing I said to you earlier when I was talking about clients. Who's the common denominator, David? Who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and what's the common denominator? Oh, yeah, you don't have a good relationship with your father.
Interesting.
So if I didn't get the correct response from a male manager, I'd revert back to a certain way, which is, oh, you're a child and you don't like your dad.
Did you find that that stagnated your career at all?
I lost me jobs.
I'm
I got fired from things for the way I spoke to some managers. Man. How do you think I
But see,
ended up in
that's
the? How do you think I ended up in trouble with the law and bankrupt? You know what I mean? Because I lost jobs and just had to take any sort of work I could get my hands on, and and you end up
gotcha.
sort of, yeah, yeah. Do you know what I mean? And you just like, oh yeah, and yeah, yeah, because you're walking around without realizing it, you've got this massive chip on your shoulder, and you don't realize that, and you don't realize that impact it has on other people. But that's also what
Wow.
makes me made me good when I was working with young male adults with head injuries because they had all the insecurities that I had, and I was able to see those insecurities. And
Yeah.
and sometimes you're like, while they're talking, you realize while they're talking, oh yeah, that's what I'm afraid of as well. So you just have a conversation with them about, yeah, no, I'm afraid of that sometimes as well, and this is why I'm afraid. And so you end up having this great connection with them, and you kind of resolve a lot of issues and understand, and you start understanding, like, because they have head injuries, they have triggers, and you suddenly realize
Yes.
these are subconscious triggers that we all have, but we don't focus on them the same way as you do when you're trying to rehabilitate somebody with a head injury. So
So what got you into the work of that? What how
because
did you wind up
I had a
directing?
criminal record, and I needed a job, and
And that's where they put you?
well, yeah, because effectively, sort of 20 years ago, I came home, realized I needed to kind of like figure out my life and do something. So I did a writing course because I figured I'd start writing because I always kind of wanted to do something like that. I did a counselling course and qualified a counsellor. Realized I didn't like counselling because it was too much in the past, and I was more proactive. Like
Sure.
everybody needs to talk and
Sure.
offload. It's really important, but if you're just going to keep stepping back into that energy is just going to anchor itself. And
Right. You
I
got
kind of I
eyes in
knew,
front of your head for a reason.
yeah, and I kind of spiritually understood that energy. Um,
Hmm.
while I was at this writing course,
Hmm.
um, I'd already retrained earlier to become a tree surgeon with my brother, because my brother, and I just like, after like I trained to do that, and I was just like, I don't like this, um,
Okay.
so I need to retrain. And I was lucky I could do a load of evening classes, and I was sat next to this woman, and her title was case manager, but she's an occupational therapist, and they work with people with head
Okay.
injuries. And she had an aggressive male headed guy with a head injury. And you can imagine, I'm 30, a tree surgeon, pretty ripped, looked pretty good. I was doing a bit of amateur in the boxing gyms at the time as well, so I didn't mind I could have a scuffle if needed to.
You
And
have a very flavorful life, David.
yeah, it
But
helps.
okay.
Though it helps. It
Yes.
helps. And
Yes.
and she was just like, have you ever been interested? And I said, well, yeah, but I've had a bit of spot of problem with the law lately. And she was just, yeah, that's right. Everybody deserves a second chance. And
Oh my God. Yeah.
yeah, so I met this guy, and yeah, he was a bit of a handful, really. But we soon resolved that, and it just sort of it just escalated from there. And before I knew it, I had like five male adults that I'd go and see, like either once, twice a week, and help them with vocational stuff, help them with their problems. And it's kind of a lot of cognitive and emotional rehabilitation, and then it turned into
I
like
love
physical
that.
rehabilitation, helping people learn to walk again and stuff like that, and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm still doing it, and
I love that.
but a lot of it comes from that, like, just it's just observing people, because
Yeah.
people say, oh yeah, because I've had lots of arguments with therapists over the years, and it's just like, people aren't books. You know what I mean? I don't care what they taught you in college and university and stuff.
Facts.
People aren't books.
Absolutely.
And I don't
That's
care if
true.
that book says you should do X, Y, or Z. You
Hmm.
haven't met the client, you haven't spoken to the client, you don't know what they like
Yes.
or what they don't like. And like, so like, here's a good example, right? You could have a client that nobody else can get on with, right? And I mean this, like, please understand this as respectfully as possible, right?
Sure. Hmm.
But if that client has a thing for black women and tarot readers, you're going to be the most effective therapist he could ever have,
Absolutely.
right? But if
Absolutely.
he hates black people and hates anyone that does tarot, you
Right.
could be the best surgeon in the world. He wouldn't let you treat them.
Right.
Do you
Right.
know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's jigsaw pieces. And if you're the right
Yes.
piece in the jigsaw, you
Uh-huh.
will achieve something that that the person who technically is better than you won't be able
Uh-huh.
to
Uh-huh.
achieve, because they're just not the right piece in the jigsaw. And these people
Absolutely.
are broken pieces, and they need
Yeah.
to be built back together. And they don't know what the picture is. Is
I
that,
love that.
you know,
I
and
love that.
the way that I would describe it is, when something happens traumatically in your life, physically or emotionally,
Hmm.
you have this picture of what your
Hmm.
world is, but it's been
Yeah.
smashed into 1,000 pieces, and it's now 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Problem is, what you're trying to rebuild is not the same picture anymore, because it's changed.
Hmm.
But you have to sort out which pieces still belong to your picture and which pieces don't belong to it anymore. So, corner, that straight edge, it might look perfect, but it's not your picture. It's not your jigsaw puzzle anymore. It doesn't belong in your piece. And you're at that 1,000 pieces, you're 500 pieces, and the landscape has changed.
That's so poetic and apropos. I love that.
Not bad for a
I
50-year
love
old
that.
Neanderthal.
Well, I'm older than you. You keep you keep me you keep mentioning names. But I
Yeah,
got you. I'm a little older than you. Yeah.
you look good. You're looking very good for you.
Thank you.
So yeah, so
Thank you.
that's the way to kind of like to try and help people visualize it. So
Yeah.
that's something that hypnosis was helpful with, understanding that visualization, giving people a picture to look at when you're talking to them,
I love that.
helps them
Hmm.
see the landscape. Because things like landscape, if I say landscape, everyone kind of has an idea what that means. If I say jigsaw puzzle,
Hmm.
everyone knows what a jigsaw puzzle is.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but another way, so like relationships, when two people are together, it's two
Hmm.
jigsaw puzzles that have somehow fit together. But
Yeah.
when you break up, you are now separate jigsaw puzzles. But the thing is, you
So
sometimes think those pieces are still a part of you. They're not. But The problem is you're like, well, that should fit in that place because it looks like it fits, and because of that, you're not seeing the piece that does fit there. And we've all had jigsaw
Yeah.
puzzles where you're like, well, that looks like the right shape, that looks like the right pattern, and it's supposed to
Right.
fit there, but it doesn't. And then suddenly,
Listen.
because you start looking in the pile, you find something almost the same that fits
Yes,
exactly, but they're both different.
that's very true. As
And
a
that,
person who does puzzle, well, used to do a lot of
yeah.
puzzles. Yeah, that is
And,
very true.
and like any jigsaw puzzle, the more complicated it is, the longer it takes and the more time in silence you have to do to sit down and look at it.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
anybody that's done complicated jigsaw puzzles know it doesn't matter how much you try, you can't rush it. Each
No,
piece
you cannot.
each piece has to be looked at, has to be held, it has to be examined, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to find where it belongs on the picture.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of jigsaw puzzles, when you said that, I was thinking about. I agree with everything that you said about the need for silence and reflection. But I was also what also came to mind was how after you complete a jigsaw puzzle, especially one that takes you 4 months to do, on personal experience,
Yeah.
you remember
Yeah.
every time, every piece of that puzzle and what it took you to get to that place.
Yeah.
And that becomes a part of your story. That's
It does.
interesting.
And once you see it, it's all pieced together, it seems obvious.
Yeah, it's like, well, why didn't I know that?
Yeah.
I remember it took me 2 weeks to find that piece,
Yeah. And how many
especially when
times
it's
you
more than a
picked,
thousand pieces.
and it's like this when you're trying to understand something emotionally,
Sure.
right? That it's like
Mm-hmm.
picking up that jigsaw piece, and you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at it, you've checked it, look at both sides, like maybe it's got two pictures on it, and you're
Yeah.
feeling the edges,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't find where it belongs. But
Yeah.
sometimes that's because it's the centerpiece of a little picture, and you've got to find the other 10 or 12 pieces that belong to it. And then you
Yeah.
find, oh, it fits there, and that there fits in that section. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always come to you at once, and that's a painful process of healing. It doesn't come to you at
It
once.
is. It is. That is true. Speaking of that, painful processes of healing and it not all coming to you at once, as a medium, I have found that um, people behave in ways on this side of the veil very differently because it takes them until they get to the other side
Yeah,
to realize what's going on over here. And they do go through a healing process. I
definitely.
found that to be very interesting because, like you said, with the example of a puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle, it's not until they transfer over to beyond the veil that they're able to see everything and know everything as it relates to their actions. That they're able to put all the pieces together, and that's where the conversations tend to come from. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't. What comes to mind right now is I had a woman who came in to get a tarot card reading with her daughter and her mom, her daughter and her friend, and her mother came through as
Yeah.
through a mediumship reading. And this was early on when I was having mediumship readings, and I thought I was losing my mind. Uh, and I and I remember, I like I said, I was at a metaphysical store and I had a tarot room that I read out of. And on the other side of my tarot room, there was an apothecary, and then there was a wall where there was stuff like African spirituality, hoodoo, voodoo, Orisha worship, Santeria, that sort of a thing. And I'd given her the transitioned woman, I had given the message to her daughter, the initial one. Then I asked her if I could please finish the reading that the woman paid for. And she said, yeah, I'm going to go do this. So I'd given her daughter, I was giving her daughter started to give her daughter the reading. And I saw her physically get up because she was sitting next to us looking at her daughter, got up. She walked. She didn't have to. She could have gone through a wall, I guess. I don't know how they work. But she physically got up and walked through the store and went on the other side. She was looking at all the African spirituality stuff and
Yeah, yeah.
and so the daughter asked, she's like, is my mom still here? I was like, she's not sitting here right now. Right now she's on the other side of the wall and she's looking at all of these things. And I said, but she's telling me, because again, they can still speak,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
She's telling me that this is not something that she would have done in this lifetime. And she was Irish Catholic. And she said, this is not something that I would have done in this
Definitely not.
lifetime. But now that I'm on, And I don't know anything about Irish Catholics. So I was like, she says she's Irish Catholic. I don't know if that's a thing. She's like, yes, it is. And I said, okay. And she said, this is something that she would have never done on this side, but she's like, she finds it cool and she understands it now. And she's like, I'm like watching her touch the candles and look at things and touch. And I'm like, your mom is like having the time of her life. And she's like, that's really cool. So we finish up the reading. Her mom comes back and you know, she tells her daughter, she's like, I just want you to know how much I love you and how I see you for, you know, all these other things that she wanted to say. But again, her mother had to be on the other side to be able to see the full puzzle and all the pieces, right? And so that's where I find that mediumship comes in to help, based on what you were just saying, to heal relationships where people don't get a chance to say everything that needs to be said because they don't know, right? And so having somebody like me or another, you know, medium who is willing to speak the message verbatim without trying to change it, which I know people do, which is ridiculous, is so important. It's
Yes.
so important because it allows people to heal. And I say that because I say the part about people changing the message. I have learned as a medium while trying to understand mediumship. Uh, and some of the things, you know, the person on the other side will say something, and then the medium will try to interpret it and then say something, send the message, but they're translating. And I
Yes.
think there's so much that is missed when you translate. So I told the divine and my counsel, I said, when I am serving in the role of a medium, I agree to say verbatim what they tell me,
Yes.
which I find to be very funny because I had one woman who was Haitian. She was Haitian and she spoke, I believe the language is Haitian Creole. And I do not speak Haitian, Creole, French, or any of that. And her son or grandson, or maybe it's her grandson, he came to me, he wanted a reading. I didn't know what language he spoke. And so I said to him, there's a woman who's, and you know, and I gave him all the things that I was seeing. And then I said, she's saying something, but I do not understand what she is saying. Like in English, it did not make sense. And he said, well, why don't you just tell me what you hear? And so I said, okay, here goes. And so I said it verbatim, what she said. And he starts to cry. Now I'm like, oh my God, what did I say? He tells me what it was. It was a very endearing message to him, but it's in Haitian French, Haitian Creole. And I'm like, nice, nice. So if we, as mediums, you know, if we do what we're supposed to do, if we recognize that we are simply a toolkit, we are simply a
Yeah.
tool, right? The phone is not going to translate unless you get that new earbud thing that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
sell.
Yeah.
But, but, you know, being in our age group, we remember when we had, you know, the punch phones or the dial tone, rotary phones, right? It did
Oh,
not
yeah.
translate.
Yeah. We
Yeah,
remember
go
when
ahead.
phones were stuck to cables that didn't leave the wall,
Yes, exactly.
walking around the
And
house with anything, with nothing connected to anything. That came decades later.
yes, I remember thinking that the long telephone cords were the best thing ever.
Yeah.
That
How
allowed you
pot?
to go in the other room or the closet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How?
Anyway,
Yeah.
but for the purposes of being a medium, I think that it is so important. So anybody who's out there learning mediumship or who's doing mediumship, be sure it is my, you know, speak the message verbatim because there is always something in that verbatim message that speaks to the soul of the person receiving the message. It
Yes.
may not make sense to us, but the message is not for us. Remove your ego when you're doing mediumship and allow yourself to also remove fear because as a medium, we will second guess ourselves. We'll think, oh, well, maybe
Mm.
I'm thinking that color because I just saw that color, not recognizing that the only reason that we saw and recognized and remembered that we saw that color is because this soul already knew that they were going to talk to you and they needed it as a touch point, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
we will second guess ourselves. So just realize, if for those who may be watching this now or later, when you're a medium, say what they give you verbatim, even if they change the the way that they say a word, right? So um, I have people who are from the South, in my the South of the U.S. who are in my family, and they have a, I call it an accent,
Yeah.
but when you it, when you think about translating the message as a medium, when you give the message verbatim, what happens is the sitter no longer sees you. They are now seeing their person. When you
Yes.
speak that language, when you speak it in a way that you translate even the accent, right? It becomes, now you are, you may as well not be there. They see their mom, they see their loved one, and they don't see you. And I think that that is what makes mediumship so powerful, right? Because you're also talking about stuff that you don't know anything about. You're identifying stuff in somebody's house and you've never been there, right?
Yeah.
You're telling them, oh yeah, when you go in the house, make a right. The fireplace on the mantle right there in the blue room, that's where the
Yeah.
stuff is. And they're like, how do you know that? Well, I don't know it. They're just telling me. I'm just telling you what they're showing me, right? And I think that it's so key, especially in the day of commodification of abilities. Um, Everybody wants to be a medium until they see dead people in their room. It's the most
Yeah.
ridiculous thing,
100%. That's exactly how
right?
it works. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be, oh, I'm a medium. Are you really?
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
like what did you just see? It's all shits and giggles until the real dead
Yeah.
people show up and manifest themselves in a
Yeah.
way that may be frightful. Like when I go to bed, I want to just go to bed in my room by myself. I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and see people who I have not invited you in. How did you
Yeah.
get here? Right.
And
So
everybody wants to be that until you have to give the bad news.
that too, that too, that
Everyone's,
too.
oh, I don't want to pass on that message. No, that's not your choice. You have to
Exactly.
you pass on what we tell you to pass on.
Absolutely. Because in passing on that information that's bad news, you could potentially save a life, right?
Yeah.
Somebody comes through and tells you, hey, I need you to knock off the smoking or the knock off the whatever, or I
Yeah.
need you to come clean about this thing. And they're like, wait a minute, how did you know that? Well, the dead person over here is telling
Yeah.
me that this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
You came for a reading. This is what you paid for,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you want me to do?
And
And it's
and
not,
I mean, you
it's
can
not an
open up a
easy
whole
thing.
no, you can open up a whole can of worms. You don't know what that
Right.
person did to the person that's still alive, and they might be coming to apologise, or
Yes.
or the person on the other side could be a victim and could be coming to say, "Look, it's okay, I forgive you."
Yes, those are interesting
Yeah.
conversations to have.
Yeah.
Speaking of interesting conversations to have, was it last year? Last year, I was at a vendor event, and I was doing tarot card readings for people. And there was this woman who came in with her significant other, and I was doing a reading for her. Uh, some information came out that was really about self empowerment, and the significant other now wanted a reading. And I could tell from his body language that at this point he was concerned about what it was that I could see as it related to him, right? And I don't read people in that way. I'm not like reading people, especially when I'm doing a card reading. It's not me. And people who've had a reading with me can say, Toni, you did the reading for me, but where did you go? Like I can
Yeah.
physically see that you were not you. And so I'm giving him the reading. And as I'm doing the reading, I'm realizing that he's the person that I just told her to stand up to. He
Oh.
was like physically abusing her, right? And so here I am now giving him messages, and I'm like, oh, crap, right? And so I'm telling him, I had to give him a message and say, here's what you stand to lose, right? I didn't say, hey, oh, I see what's happening now. You're beating this woman, and her divine counsel is telling her that she needs to stand up to you. But I did tell him, I said, well, what I'm seeing here in a very nice way is that you have the capacity to build a beautiful home. Unfortunately, you continue to build it on ground that's not solid. So, whatever it is that you're building, you want to make sure that you shore it up in a way that is holistic and kind, and that you think about how that house will be used and who will be living in it, and the materials that you use, and make sure that they are sustainable and gentle and environmentally friendly, you know? Um without me having to say, stop beating your girlfriend. I didn't know it when I was reading,
Yeah,
doing the reading here. And, but it's in the way that you deliver those messages. And it was very uncomfortable because I also, um, what was even worse about that scenario, David, was it wasn't just him that was part of the equation, but he had an attachment
yeah, yeah.
that was supporting the negative work.
It's
And so
hard.
not only was I speaking to him, but I was speaking to this entity. I won't even give it the weight of a deity, but it was this entity that had partnered with him to do this thing, right? And that's not a comfortable conversation to have, right? And I am notorious for this. I am notorious for going into tarot card readings without doing spiritual work to protect myself. Again, rose-colored glasses,
Yeah,
always thinking, "Oh, everybody's fine," and then I'm like, "Holy shit! I just saw a demon."
yeah.
Okay, I should have probably thought about that. Thank God for my counsel that stays with me always,
Mm.
my angels that are always with me. But to see that it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing.
And that's probably a good place to stop because we've been talking for 2.5 hours.
Oh my God, David. You see what I'm saying? I told you I could sit and talk to you for hours. And here we are talking for hours. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your success and to be on this podcast. I'm so proud of you and excited for you
Thank
about
you.
what you're doing, what you've done and where you're going. And I'll make sure that I stay tuned to see, how things unfold for you. It's super exciting.
Thank you. And there you go. Like I said, it was a long conversation, and we actually carried on talking for about another hour. We just didn't stop. Yeah, and these things always fascinate me. But it is what it is. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do check out the book, check out the website. The links are in the description. And as always, thank you very much for watching, for listening, for the support. Wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.